On April 15, 1909, the King of Italy, Victor Emmanuel III, the Queen Mother Margherita, and the soon-to-be Prime Minister Sidney Sonnino convened at the Roman airport of Centocelle for a special flight demonstration by the American pilot Wilbur Wright. A few years earlier, Wilbur and his brother Orville had first flown a plane in Kitty Hawk, North Carolina, but after their glorious experiments of 1903, their technology was struggling to emerge in the United States. So by 1908, the Wrights had begun to look at Europe as a new market. Starting from Le Mans, France in August 1908, they organized flight demonstrations around the continent to promote heavier-than-air flight over the by then more common dirigible balloons. And by the spring of 1909, prior to Wilbur's visit to Rome, an aura of mysticism and legend already surrounded them in Italy. Wilbur Wright did not disappoint expectations, and that April morning in Centocelle, he completed the first ever engine-operated flight on Italian soil, or rather above it. That was the beginning of Italian aviation. The event promoted planes as a viable alternative to dirigibles, as confirmed by the plane that Wright sold and the training that he gave over the following days to the first two Italian pilots, Mario Calderara and Umberto Savoia. The demonstration also spurred two key events for Italian aeronautics: the International Aerial Circuit of Montichiari near Brescia in September of 1909, and in November of the same year, the first exposition of Italian aviation at the Hotel Corso of Milan. The aerial contest in Montichiari was the first aviation race in Italy and the second in Europe. Among its competitors were the American motorcyclist Glenn Curtiss, pioneering designer of plane engines for Alexander Graham Bell, the Italian pilot Mario Calderara, who had just been trained by Wilbur Wright, and two Frenchmen, Louis Blériot, who had flown across the British Channel the same year, and Henri Rouget, who would set a new height record in Montichiari, flying at 198.5 meters. Among the attendees were the poet Gabriele D'Annunzio, who on that occasion first flew with Calderara and Curtiss, the composer Giacomo Puccini, the director of Corriere della Sera Luigi Albertini, and the young writer Franz Kafka. The Montichiari circuit provided literary imagination with an unprecedented stimulus. The contest gave D'Annunzio the inspiration for his visionary aviation novel Forse che sì, forse che no, maybe yes, maybe not, similarly featuring an airplane contest and the attainment of a height record. The Montichiari race also left a mark on the futurist poet Paolo Buzzi, whose collection Airplanes, Winged Songs, published in October 1909, was the mother for later iconography of flight and featured Marinetti's Let's Kill Off the Moonlight, his second text after the Manifesto. The Montichiari event also captured the imagination of Milan's industrialists, who founded the Società Italiana di Aviazione soon after. Its premier event was the 1909 Aviation Exposition of Milan that we mentioned, an event which was followed in 1910 by the challenge to cross the Alps in flight. The initiative would profoundly affect Italian public opinion, especially after the plane of Peruvian aviator Geo Chavez tragically crashed right before his landing in Domodossola. It was at this time, against the backdrop of these developments, that a 20-year-old engineer and aviation industrialist, Giovanni Battista Caproni, decided to open an industrial airport in Cascina Malpensa, northwest of Milano. Gianni Caproni, as he was better known, had founded a biplane factory in the Milanese district of Taliedo in 1908, looking for something other than the dirigible business. Caproni was an outsider. He was born in 1886 in the Trentino region, which at the time was part of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. And he had been trained first as a civil engineer at the Technical University of Munich, Germany, and then as an electrical engineer in Liège, Belgium. It was there in 1908, while he was completing his doctorate, that he attended a flight demonstration by Wilbur Wright. Enthused by Wright's idea of engine-operated flight, he had chosen the hangars of Taliedo as a site to produce biplanes. His choice related to two factors. First, as an Italian irredentist, or rather as an Italian born in Austrian territory embracing the cause of Italianità, he wanted to live and work in Italy, and Milan at the time was the center of Italian aviation. Second, the aerodrome of Taliedo was Italy's only manufacturing site for flying machines, after the aviation engineer Enrico Forlanini established the first Italian factory of dirigibles there in 1907. The Taliedo aerodrome would later be replaced by the nearby airport of Linate, which, not by chance, would be dedicated to Forlanini. Now, a year into his business in 1909, Caproni decided to open a new industrial airport in Cascina Malpensa, between Busto Arsizio and Lake Maggiore. Two reasons made that area appealing to the young aircraft designer. First, Busto Arsizio was a hub of Italy's textile industry. Second, Lake Maggiore was a key manufacturing site for the nautical industry, and its Maestri d'Ascia master shipwrights were renowned all over Europe. So, fabric and wood. Those, at the time, were the main ingredients of a biplane: a wood vessel and cloth wings. In the new location, which now hosts the international airport of Milano Malpensa, Caproni began a new production line and designed the prototype of the CA-1, the first engine-powered aircraft built in Italy. The airplane ended up destroyed during its first flight on May 27, 1910, 4 months before the death of Chavez. But, as we'll see, the development of the new airplane technology also passed through risky experimentation and oftentimes tragic failure. Now, as early as 1911, Italians became the first to adopt airplanes for aerial bombings, as seen in the military raids upon Tripoli during the Libyan War. Marinetti himself would describe this new experience in his reports, first of the Battle of Tripoli and later of the Battle of Adrianople in his 1914 masterpiece Zangtuntun. It was around this time, in the early 1910s, that Caproni began to build aircrafts for military use, releasing the CA-20, the world's first fighter plane, in 1914, and the CA-31, Italy's first multi-engine aircraft, in 1915. During World War I, Caproni became a leader in the production of heavy bombers, not just for Italy, but also for Britain, France, and the United States. With its 745 manufactured bombers, the CA-33 played a major role in the bombing campaigns of the Entente. Of the pilots who flew Caproni airplanes, we need to mention here the war ace Francesco Baracca, who marked his aircraft with the logo of a prancing horse, the poet Gabriele D'Annunzio, who flew over Vienna in 1918, throwing propaganda leaflets over the enemy capital, the American aviator George Lewis, the first US pilot to cross the Alps, and Captain Fiorello LaGuardia, future mayor of New York, to whom the city dedicated one of its airports, who flew Capronis in the Italian War as commanding officer of the Foggiana division. So, it is fair to say that in this pioneering phase, Caproni became to military aviation what the Wrights were to general aviation. After the period of expansion during the war, when Caproni shaped a new idea of air combat, the business continued to produce aircraft for military purposes during the fascist regime and until World War II. Starting in 1919, however, Caproni also began to focus on commercial aviation, as he reconverted wartime bombers into cargo aircraft and tested the possibility of passenger flights. Despite their failure, two post-war projects paved the way for the later evolution of airline service and transatlantic flight: the Caproni CA-48 and the Caproni CA-60, the so-called Capronissimo. The CA-48 was the first airplane to carry passengers, and it unfortunately crashed near Verona on August 2, 1919. This would be the first air disaster in Italian history. The CA-60 instead was a flying boat with 8 engines and 3 sets of triple wings, designed to carry 100 passengers across the Atlantic Ocean. The aircraft prototype crashed on the waters of Lake Maggiore in its second flight on March 4, 1921, and broke up upon impact. Now, these two failures lead me to a pair of considerations. First, in our age, where flying is a given, we no longer think of the risk and audacity involved in this experience. How many times during takeoff do we pay attention to what is happening? Were we to really lift our gaze an instant and think about it, we would have to cry every time. Seriously. How many generations of humans desire to be lifted into the air before us? How many heroes gave their lives for the dream of flying? How many failures, even dramatic ones, were needed to make planes safe? We mentioned Geo Chavez, to whom the poet Giovanni Pascoli dedicated a moving poem in 1910. But test pilots and civilian passengers are also part of this story. Their sacrifice reminds us that flying is not a tame or risk-free space, but rather a well-studied and passionate adventure. In this sense, it is remarkable that the Caproni factory in Vizzola Ticino near Malpensa incorporates a chapel dedicated to these heroes, as a reminder of the marveling dreams that moved our forerunners to pursue the impossible, and of their strenuous tenacity in endeavoring to go beyond their limits. The second consideration relates to the project of the Transaereo, the giant transatlantic passenger seaplane of 1921, also known as Capronissimo or Noviplano from its 9 wings. The failed project of the CA-60 is a testament to the audacious humility required both in flight and in entrepreneurship. In the 2013 movie The Wind Rises, dedicated to the Japanese aircraft designer Jiro Horikoshi, engineer of the Mitsubishi A5M fighter used by Japan's Air Force during World War II, the director Hayao Miyazaki captures the essence of this position. In the film, the young Jiro, who is afraid of flying because of his nearsightedness, fictionally encounters Gianni Caproni in a dream. Caproni invites him onto the wings of his majestic Transaereo and confesses to the young man that he never flew a plane, but that building them is better than flying. At this point in Miyazaki's work, Caproni tells Jiro something that he will remember at the end as an old man. Airplanes, he says, are not instruments of war or means to make a profit. They are splendid dreams. They are splendid dreams. We live in an age where we can fly. How many times do we forget this? Against this backdrop, Caproni's failed projects of civil aviation acquire then a new dimension. The audacity of dreaming and the humility born of fallibility go together, and crashes are not failures, but rather the dramatic path toward the acquisition and advancement of knowledge. We can see then here that innovation is a dream full of failures, a humbling experience of constant testing, a mindset that embraces the unknown with hope and availability. Facing the sky, a mountain, or simply an uncharted territory, there is no right path, just the terrain we discover over time, sometimes seeing the results, sometimes playing a part in what someone else might find later. Caproni's experimental work led in a way to the visible perfecting of aircrafts, as documented in the military field or in the height records set by his CA-90 biplane in 1930 and later by his CA-161 in 1938, the first to fly at 65,000 feet. At the same time, however, Caproni's innovative vision did not bear fruit right away, but opened paths for the future, as we see in the case of Transaereo, which saw the possibility of transatlantic crossing 18 years before the first air route opened by Pan Am in 1939, or in the experimental aircraft Stipa of 1932, whose hollow barrel-shaped fuselage, enclosing engine and propeller, anticipated the later development of jet propulsion. In this sense, the story of Caproni is part of the larger history and shared dream of flying. Caproni was aware of it, and when he established the Caproni Museum in Taliedo in 1927, he conceived it as both a depository of his historic vehicles and a storytelling site about human aviation. With the aid of his wife Timina Guasti, he assembled a collection of paintings on the theme, which included works by the futurist artists Giacomo Balla, Tato, Figlia, Benedetta Cappa, Tullio Crali, Gerardo Dottori and Mario Sironi. In parallel with Marinetti's manifesto on aerial poetry, his first aerial dictionary and his fictional aeropoem of La Spezia's Golf, the futurist attention to flight in the late 1920s not only reflected the new centrality of aviation in the human experience or in fascist politics, but it also gave new creative momentum to the movement, inaugurating its second phase. Aviation had made its way into contemporary news and social life through the feats of Francesco de Pinedo, who first flew a seaplane from Italy to Japan and Australia in 1925, or Italo Balbo, who completed 2 flights from Rome to Rio de Janeiro in 1930 and 1931, and from Rome to Chicago in 1933. In this context, the futurists captured the artistic potential of seeing the world from above, constructing a visual narrative of height and speed, acceleration and vertigo, power and lightness. Against this backdrop, the second futurism, or aviation futurism, is certainly an area to investigate more. Caproni continued to gain prominence in Italian industry in the 1930s and 1940s as he acquired the car company Isotta Fraschini, collaborated with the motorcycle brand Ducati, and opened a factory in Predappio, Mussolini's hometown, near the military airport of Forlì. In 1940, the King of Italy named him Count of Taliedo for his merits, and with World War II, his company continued to grow as it provided aircrafts for the Italian war effort. Caproni's legacy, however, would be spoiled after the war, following unproven accusations of collusion with the Germans. Caproni would be discharged, but his company entered a rapid crisis which would eventually lead to its closure in 1950. Caproni died in Rome in 1957, and his body was transferred back to his hometown of Massone d'Arco in Trentino, which is now an Italian territory. Now, to really give you a sense of his impact on global aviation, I want to conclude with a famous anecdote regarding his last years. In the early 1950s, Caproni visited the United States and had a chance to meet President Harry Truman. When Caproni entered the Oval Office, he saw a picture of himself on the wall, next to a portrait of Wilbur Wright. "I found them here," Truman explained. "President Roosevelt kept them up for the entire war, and I didn't remove them. You are the founding fathers of aviation, and the United States salute you for it." This sums it up for today. Wright's dream became that of Caproni. Their dreams and failures, along with those of many pioneers who followed them and preceded us, have become our dream. The airport of Centocelle, where Wright first flew in Italy, has become a park in the middle of Rome. And Cascina Malpensa, where Caproni opened his factory, has become the gateway to Milan and one of the most important airports in Europe. Thank you very much for watching. I invite you to subscribe to this YouTube channel or to the webpage www.italianinnovators.com to receive notifications of new episodes, the lessons of the Italian Innovators course, and updates about my online lectures. You can also follow me on LinkedIn at my personal profile or Instagram at Italian Innovators for additional materials about the show. Thanks again. Arrivederci e alla prossima.